State of the Nation Business Breakfast, which is how the State of the Nation started. So if you're a company out there that wants to get information, or even an individual that wants to get information, that wants to hear some of our best guests, we've got our first business breakfast of the year lined up for the 27th of February at the Sandton Convention Center, where we'll have Prince Mashele and Davy Root, two of our most popular contributors, one talking largely about the political situation in South Africa and what to look forward to, and then Davy Root, the renowned economist, who will be looking at the South African economy and what that holds. More information will be in the description below, but come and join us, have a good breakfast, bring some of your clients, and get some insights. Welcome to the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham. And before I begin, I wanted to just tell you about our business breakfast that we're holding. It's a way of us raising some funds and to get some quality information to businesses that need to know exactly where South Africa is going. On the 27th of February at the Sandton Convention Center, Prince Mashele, Davy Root will be giving us some great insights into the politics and economics that you need to know about. So if you're interested, all the information is in the description box below. So let's talk today. Today we have our dose of common sense, and that is by one of our favorite parliamentarians from the Freedom Front Plus, Corne Mulder. Corne, welcome back to the State of the Nation.
Thank you, Mike. It's a privilege and honor to participate, and thank you for that.
Yeah, so every time we kind of, South Africa is a soap opera, and we're going through one of those sort of plot twists again, where the government of national unity that at the very start of the year was looking secure, everybody's talking about it definitely making through to the next election, suddenly seems to be in a bit of jeopardy.
Yes, unfortunately so. I am honest with you if I say I'm concerned about coalitions, the principle of coalitions on government of national unity level, but also on other levels in local governments as well. The underlying thing of any kind of arrangement like a government of national unity or a coalition would be that the participating entities or parties are really absolutely committed to make this thing work. And that means you cannot just dig your heels in and say, this was our stance, this is my position, and I'm going to push this through. And although the government of national unity, as far as I'm concerned, started off on a very positive footing, and there was huge enthusiasm about that, especially because of the possibilities for the economy, etc., etc. Since then, things have, as far as I'm concerned, gone the wrong road. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's come with contributions. It's hard to see who everybody's enemies are, because within the government of national unity, especially if one recalls the multi-party charter parties, of which you were one of them, seem to have taken aim directly at the DA. And they seem to be enemy number one, not the ANC. And Cyril's having a good laugh at you.
Well, yes and no. In the end, the different political parties all are there because of their own stance, because they stand for something, they've got their own constituency, and obviously they compete from time to time, and if parties compete in the same fish pond, there will be some friction and some conflict as such. But the problem basically, as far as I'm concerned with the government of national unity, is I don't experience at the moment a true commitment by the ruling party, and with all due respect by the Democratic Alliance and maybe some of the others, I don't know, to make this thing really work. It's one thing to say we want to make this thing work, but then all around the table must be prepared to compromise. And if the stances are very hard and not reaching out in that sense, we're in trouble. And then I start to get the idea we are not in this, and I'm talking in general, that the people who are involved, the parties, are not in this necessarily to make it work. It is almost as if they are there to outplay one another and to reposition themselves with the hope, I must just do this or that, and then at the next election, I will do so well, I won't need any of you again, and that goes to all sides, and then I'll do my own thing and I will govern alone. And that's unfortunate, because if we really want to, we need to set the tone that the future, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be this kind of arrangements, governments of national unity, coalitions, and then everybody must buy in. And you know the theory, basically, parties go into an election with their own manifestos. And then the result comes like we've had now, ANC 40, DA 20 something, and none got sufficient support to implement their manifesto. Then you are supposed to negotiate a new government of national unity manifesto, and that becomes the policy of this government. But we haven't seen that. Maybe when we get to the budget and there are some steps announced by the Minister of Finance, we don't know, could be some indication if we are moving along some of those terms of reference that were in the documents of the Government of National Unity.
Now, the real beneficiary out of all of this seems to be Cyril Ramaphosa, who only needs a crown because he's behaving like a king, isn't he? He sits there in the middle, like he's one step above Parliament, one step above the presidency. It's now a super duper presidency, almost royalty. He can just do what he likes.
Well, part of the problem is, and sometimes it's causality. The one thing leads to the other. We went into the arrangements for the Government of National Unity after the election, and we are still bound by the Constitution that gave us limited time periods to implement stuff. And people will tell you that Mr. Ramaphosa was elected, I think, on the 14th of June last year, that evening, with the support of the parties who are now in the Government of National Unity, and he became the president. But at that stage, there was no final agreement in terms of what is supposed to happen within the new government. And that makes you very vulnerable. He's now elected, whether you like it or not. So I agree, that is part of the problem. And it doesn't seem that there's a willingness to compromise. It's one thing to say, yes, I'm listening, but I'm not taking it seriously.
So two questions. One is, has an agreement been reached subsequently?
Yes, the agreement was reached subsequently. There were negotiations going on, and the so-called terms of reference, the broader documentation of the Government of National Unity, were then signed and implemented, and the parties will do this, that, and the other. But the practical problem at the moment is there was no agreement in terms of that kind of legislation and policy statements that were on the table before the election, when the ANC was still alone in power. And there are some bills that they just pushed through Parliament right before the election, like the Bella Bill, like the expropriation, like the National Health Insurance Bill. So those things were agreed before, were just adopted. There were no agreement between the parties in the Government of National Unity. Now the ANC says, but these things were agreed before the election by Parliament and approved, and we are not going to discuss this, we are just going to push it through, and one after the other is being pushed through. And I think the president tried to call the bluff, or not the bluff, but he tested the other parties in the Government of National Unity when he signed the Bella thing, and he just went ahead, and he saw what the reactions were or not, and then next followed the expropriation bill, and obviously national health will be coming next.
But to be fair, I suppose parties like the DA, yourselves, did raise about as much noise as one can about the Bella Bill.
Yes, that's true. But there is some concern because you remember when the president made public the fact that he signed the bill, he said he did discuss with all the leaders and everybody was in agreement. And I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And if you look at the detail of what happened there, and it's quite alarming, because the subcommittee of the deadlock breaking mechanism, basically the clearinghouse mechanism, I served on that, Helen Ziller served on that. The report that we brought out basically gave the parties, the leaders and the president two options. But the president conveyed to the leaders that there are three options, which is not correct. And in the end, a different option was implemented than anything that we proposed from the clearinghouse mechanism.
Yeah, our president has really taken to distorting the truth dramatically. But if you go back, there's not a lot that Ramaphosa or the ANC need to do, because the coalition partners are busy doing his work for him, right? By breaking down old alliances, and the ANC have just become sort of useful in helping you to break down old alliances and things like that. You guys have all jumped for it, hook, line, and sinker. We've seen that primarily at local government level.
Yes, I think there's a difference to a certain extent in terms of how parties perceive the different levels of government. In other words, the former multi-party parties are cooperating within the Government of National Unity, and I want to believe that they are all committed to make this work. The ANC's got their own strategy. The fact that they've got 40%, they are pushing ahead with their agenda. They've made some utterances lately to say that they're not going to deviate from their policies, etc., etc. That's obviously causing stress and problems. When you come to local government level, it's a bit of a different kettle of fish altogether, for the simple reason parties are already starting to position themselves and reposition themselves for the local government elections that are next year, 2026. On national level, the next election is in 2029. So people have just started in this process and they're trying to make this thing work, hopefully. But my experience is that with regard to local government, there are parties that are positioning themselves now with a view of the election of next year. And it's just a reality.
Now, that positioning might be tactically astute. It may be a good way of seeing things, but what it does seem to take no interest in is the interests of the public.
Absolutely. And in that regard specifically, I'm mainly involved in the Western Cape with regard to the coalitions there. We take the coalitions very seriously. We've said throughout that we want to be a stable and reliable coalition partner. And we've been in I think 11 coalition governments there with the Democratic Alliance. And I can give you the examples one after the other where things went wrong and what the reasons may be. And I've got my view, and the DA will have a different view. They will say something else, why they think things went wrong. But what played out to a certain extent was that in terms of those coalition agreements, there are certain mechanisms to deal with problems. And specifically in Oudtshoorn, that was one of the first ones. There were some problems with the mayor from the Democratic Alliance and the other coalition partners, and it was not only the Freedom Front Plus, there were two other coalition partners as well. All of them agreed that there's a problem. We did have a meeting of the technical committee. We're dealing with that, a coalition oversight group. I was present, Helen Zille was present, etc. And all the parties said, we want to retain this coalition, but we've got a problem with the mayor. And the problem was basically that people felt he was not listening to them in the other parties. One example, with all due respect, it was about the budget. And the other parties in the coalition made certain inputs with regard to the budget. They were not listened to. The mayor said, this is my budget, I'm going ahead with my budget. And he didn't have the number of votes. So he went to the ANC, and with the ANC support, he pushed the budget through. Now, technically, that's immediately a complete violation of the coalition agreement. How can you do that? So the parties in the coalition said, we want the mayor to be removed. Give us a different candidate from your party and we will support them and continue with the coalition. Obviously, the DA refused. They said, you cannot prescribe to us. Then it followed with a motion of no confidence. And immediately after the motion of no confidence, all the parties, and that included the ANC, said, and you must remember, I think that was in November or September last year, I can't remember the exact date. That was just after the creation of the Government of National Unity. They said, well, if the parties that are in the Government of National Unity, and most of them are there in that council, why can't we duplicate exactly on national level in the local council and form a government of local unity? And that will bring stability in the community because everybody is being listened to. It would have been 85-90% of the representatives of the voting public's views. We supported that. The Democratic Alliance refused. The other parties agreed, and we formed a government of local unity, which is unfortunate. And I think from there it deteriorated, and that is still the case. It's playing out at the moment in Swellendam, exactly the same kind of thing. So that's unfortunate, and I think we still need a discussion of, is it possible to form governments of local unity? Isn't that a solution? But parties need to address that and see if we can find one another, because I predict that after the next local government election next year or the early 27, we will be confronted with the same situation once again. So I know it's a new idea. Maybe people haven't applied their minds in that instance, but that was part of the problem. And then from there, things deteriorated between ourselves and the Democratic Alliance. We are still in some coalitions and others we are not. It's unfortunate because you're right. It should be about service delivery and the interests of the public.
So in Oudtshoorn and Swellendam, for the residents, how's the service delivery looking?
Well, with all due respect, in Oudtshoorn, I think it's going very well. We've got a government of local unity in Oudtshoorn now. The mayor is from the Freedom Front Plus. There are representatives from the ANC, from the Patriotic Alliance, from some local parties, etc. The DA they are playing an opposition role. That's their decision. But I think it's going very well in Oudtshoorn, and we are turning the town around. And we are serious about that because we want to set an example of what can be done. And I think we are trying to do that. It will be even so much better if the Democratic Alliance would be part of that.
No, they are the common denominator whipping boy at the moment, because obviously we live through the city of Tshwane.
Yes.
Significant, the capital city of the country, one of Gauteng's failing metros. We see that Ekurhuleni is a complete basket case.
Yeah.
But many of your coalition partners, parties in the Government of National Unity, are keeping them in power, people like the Patriotic Alliance.
Yes.
And the ANC are happy to play both sides of the road.
Yes.
And, do you not see yourselves within the GNU? Are the parties, when do the adults walk into the room? Or you're not just being useful idiots?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think in the minds of the parties, they draw a complete separation between the Government of National Unity and what's happening on local government level. So the Government of National Unity is operating within that agreement, but also within the parameters of the Constitution, how the executive functions, how cabinet functions with the president, the different ministries, etc. And I think there's a complete separation from what's happening there as to what's playing out on local government level, where we are stumbling with one crisis to the next, and especially the three big metros in Gauteng, which is the economic heartland of the country. We see what's happening there, and it's tragic.
So the real question starts coming up is that what happens come the 2026 local government elections, sort of 18 months away, roughly somewhere around there. Have all these machinations, will they significantly change the voting patterns?
I think they will. I think the electorate is taking note of what's happening and how parties are positioning themselves, and they will use their vote to express their views on these things. And each and every party's got its own challenges. In other words, I'm speculating perhaps that the ANC are looking over their shoulder all the time. What's MK going to do? How strong is MK going to be? What about the EFF? And each and every party is basically doing that, I think. But the electorate will decide, and some of the parties will grow, some of the parties will diminish. And unfortunately, I think we will have to start all over again after the elections and see this is now the outcome. Now we have to start again negotiating coalitions and try to put them together. It should have been different. We should have had the experience now of 5 years of successful coalitions where people understand how it works. They have to compromise and understand that it's about service delivery and the electorate coming first. We are not there yet, and I'm frustrated. I think we have lost 5 years in the process, 4 years so far.
Yeah. Which sort of like, it does sort of beg the question of saying that there is one party, there's no doubt, that is benefiting dramatically from this, and that is the ANC.
Yes.
Because they've got MK doing a lot of their dirty work for them, MK looking dysfunctional, which makes the ANC look less dysfunctional, and then the rest of the parties in the GNU tearing strips out of the DA largely.
Yes and no. I agree. The ANC came out of the election with 40%. I think to them it was a huge shock. To everybody it was a shock. It was unthinkable that the ANC would really go not only below 50 but to 40%. But I think we were under pressure. The parties that negotiated, or the negotiators, they had to put something together within 14 days, which is not realistic. The system should be changed to allow even a few months if possible. Like you see in Europe, for example, where a new agenda is negotiated in detail and the parties are bound to implement that kind of thing. That didn't really happen. So the ANC came out of this, and obviously if you look at some of the by-election results, the ANC is slowly but surely making a comeback. The results are improving. However, I think there are some challenges coming their way as we get closer to the local government election, because most likely a real significant number of their councillors will defect to MK coming towards the election. The MK has never participated in a general local government election. So in many councils that the ANC may think that they have this position now, it may completely fall apart in the months coming towards as we get closer to the election. But it's unfortunate. The ANC is still in a very dominant position, and we for 30 years we had a one dominating party throughout, mainly the ANC in general. The DA is a different question in the Western Cape. But suddenly it's not an overnight change where suddenly they are now becoming also a minority party. They accept that and they play again in terms of those rules. That's unfortunately so.
Now, Corne, you've had a front row seat in your tent
Yes.
where it seems like that tent only just needs a ringmaster because, I mean, it's a disgrace that
Yes.
Parliament sits in a tent. It really
Yes.
is a disgrace. Shows that, the custodians of South Africa don't give a damn about, South Africa and its global image.
Yes.
But you've had a front row seat to see the new leader of the opposition party, that is Mkhonto we Sizwe, led by that great parliamentarian, Dr. John Hlophe. How big is the dysfunction within that party?
It's huge. It's a total dysfunction. Remember now that the turnover in Parliament after the election was more than 50%. MK came back as a party with 55 seats basically, and because of the reality that we have a government of national unity, the DA is no longer the opposition, they are part of government. So even in Parliament, in terms of the seating, to the right of the Speaker is the government, first the ANC, then the DA, then the IFP, and all the parties in sequence of their numbers. And then on the left, you've got the official opposition, and that's MK. But MK has never been to Parliament until the election of last year. So there's no experience in terms of Parliament, in terms of procedures, in terms of anything. And even the government of national unity is in desperate need of an effective opposition. That's how politics should be.
So that's starting to beg the question of what is the point of the government of national unity? It hasn't helped us with the economy. It hasn't helped getting opposition parties to rally behind some better cause. Instead, you run to the ANC in Oudtshoorn, and Action SA runs to the ANC in Tshwane. ANC just sit back, wait for somebody to break the alliance and come and speak to them. Patriotic Alliance runs to the ANC in Johannesburg.
Well, the problem is this, and I've said that in the past, and it remains true. If you as a party don't have a majority on your own, you're not a big party. You are a larger party perhaps, but you still are not the majority. And the emphasis is always on the larger party under those circumstances to be the most humble and to go out of its way to keep other parties in the fold so that combined we have a majority and we can govern. So in most of these local government situations where we have had coalitions and still have with the Democratic Alliance, they are the larger party. The emphasis is on them to keep the whole thing together, to reach out, to accommodate, etc., etc. And I can give you a list now of 8, 9 events in different councils where exactly the opposite happens, and that causes these things to break down, etc., etc. I won't say the government of national unity didn't bring anything positive yet. No. I think we have a different situation. Things are falling into place. The ANC is under pressure or not, maybe internally because of MK pushing from the one side, and the president obviously must perform. He must, in terms of his own party, deliver. They've got a policy conference coming up at some stage, and he's got to give feedback. I have implemented the resolutions of the previous conference. So he's pushing ahead with all that legislation. That causes quite a lot of havoc within the government of national unity because immediately there's pressure on the other parties like the DA, like the Freedom Front Plus and others to say, but why don't you do something about that? The test for me with regard to the government of national unity will come when we get to the economy and to see what steps are being taken to push South Africa towards a growth path, towards job creation, all those kind of things, because the ANC committed themselves in documentation that they want to change that. They haven't done so yet. So I'm looking forward to see what the Minister of Finance comes up with the budget on the 19th of February and see what kind of steps are the ANC seriously taking. Because if they implement some of those things, it would be a deviation from previous positions in terms of some of those issues, relaxing certain measures, etc., to make it more South Africa more investment friendly, etc. We haven't seen that.
Yeah, but you're talking about the economy. What is the hope that the Minister of Finance is going to break ranks with the ANC and take advice from the minority parties?
No. I hope that the Minister of Finance will bring measures to Parliament and to the country that the ANC also agrees with, the President included, that has the approval of the ANC to start to create job growth, etc., etc. We haven't seen that because in the agreement, the contents of the declaration of intent basically The emphasis are on job creation, economic growth, etc., etc. We need to see that. So it can't be the Minister of Finance acting on his own. The test will come if the ANC is committed to do that, or were those just words at the moment and they stick to the normal policies. If that happens, it's a failure, no doubt. And the opposition parties will have to ask themselves, what is the purpose? Why are we here? And take their own decisions.
So you're saying that the budget could be the seminal moment.
Yes.
Survive or not survive
Exactly.
with the GNU.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think then you better start brushing up your CV, because there's no ways it can survive.
I don't have to apply for
You
anything.
don't have to apply for anything.
I'm still just a member.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's a fairly sort of crazy situation to expect a party that has passed now 2 of the 3 destructive pieces of legislation, and whether they actually cause the kind of havoc that everybody's saying, I doubt. But it's a very bad sort of message that's coming out of South Africa.
Very
right?
true. Yes.
So it's not so much the law that's been passed, and I think this is where everybody gets it straight. They don't give a shit about this. Now, I've made the statement that within the government of national unity, it would appear to me that what we've got is all of the other parties wanting to make South Africa better, but the ANC only interested in making the ANC better.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I can't help thinking that within all the parties, in your own peculiar, beautiful ways, are just helping them with the job.
Yes, that is a possibility. It's a scenario, and I think you're most likely right. The ANC had a conference, a regional thing, while the NEC, not too long ago, I think it was on the East Rand. And when they came out of that, they convinced themselves that we have to rescue the ANC, we've got to turn things around, and we have to use all the mechanisms that are available to us, including the government of national unity, to reposition the ANC in the sense of recovering their lost support, so that at the next election, they have their majority and they say, thank you very much, we don't need anybody else. And that's their main focus. And that is exactly why it can't succeed. As long as that is the approach, it will not succeed. And in the meantime, I think the opposition parties are to a very large extent still committed to say, well, let's try to make South Africa better, as you correctly point out. Because if the stance on all sides are, we are here to try and outwit each other. And let's see who can use these mechanisms so that we can come out on top at the next election. It will be to the detriment of everybody, and South Africa will lose in that process.
I suppose where we're differing is that I think it's already happening. The passing of this controversial legislation set the tone. The disregarding of any other bit of insights has cemented that idea, if you ask me.
Yes, I agree. The ANC's argument would be, and their argument basically, that these things were agreed before the government of national unity came into power, the previous government, the previous parliament, and they are just now implementing that. What is true is, if they were really sincere and if they were strong enough in their commitment to make a difference and to find common ground in the middle, they would have said, a strong president could have said, this is a new government. These are our new priorities. These things will upset what we are trying to achieve in the economy. We need to have a relook. We take these things back, we amend or we change everything. Which only indicates to me that the president is not feeling that comfortable or is that strong within his own party. And we've got the example. We've seen in the past on 2 occasions where presidents, incumbents, were recalled overnight. It happened to Mr. Mbeki, it happened to Mr. Zuma, it can happen to Mr. Ramaphosa as well, and I think he's very much aware of that.
Okay, so let's talk about that if you're comfortable to talk about it.
Sure.
If there's no doubt that everything to play with, we know the concept of lame duck presidents.
Yes.
And those examples of Mbeki getting recalled, Jacob Zuma getting recalled, etc., was largely as a result of them moving into that realm of lame duck presidency, where people understand that the future largesse is going to be handed out by the next president.
Correct.
Now, there's a lot of speculation and conjecture about which way the ANC is going to go.
Yes.
Are you seeing anything that we're not?
No, I think, obviously at the moment there is a process where people start to, and they've already started a long time ago, to position themselves in terms of putting themselves in the for that kind of transition. And there was a time when it was almost a practice that started to develop where the deputy president becomes the president. But it was not necessarily so, because you remember the previous deputy president did not become the president or the new deputy who was replaced. The way I see it is that it's quite clear that the current deputy president is absolutely interested, and he is running and would like to become that president. It may be that Mr. Ramaphosa may have somebody else in mind. A name of the Minister of International Relations is being mooted. We don't know. And it will depend, because the leadership election of the ANC is end of 2027. And some rumors say that if the president accepts the party line and allows the deputy president to become the president of the ANC, he will be allowed to complete his term. But if he pushes his own agenda and he fails, he will be recalled immediately. So it's a very difficult thing how this is going to play out. Rumors say that the Secretary General is interested, Fikile is interested. Some people name Mr. David Makura, which is an interesting option. So it's unsure at this stage where it will go. But the reality is that party, the ruling party, or not the ruling party, the larger party, the former ruling party alone, needs to elect new leadership end of next year. It cannot be Mr. Ramaphosa again, and then we are already in that transition. And sometimes presidents at that stage, or even now, starts to think in terms of their own legacy. What am I going to leave behind? The G20 is very important. I want to play a role internationally, etc., etc. And then that leads you to become a lame duck, I believe, because you don't want to venture into new things, really. You are just busy steering and trying to protect what remains.
Okay, so let's talk about, you mentioned the G20 and international relations.
Yes.
There's a thing that I've been quite strong on, because I see it happening, and you were around. You and I have a few legacies of people that lived through the previous transition in South Africa, and it was driven not because suddenly everybody decided to become nice people. It was driven by international affairs.
Yes.
And we might be seeing something similar, with a move in the world away from what we've grown accustomed to over the last 30 years.
Yes.
And we now have Donald Trump in his second term.
Yes.
He's learned from his first term, and he ain't sitting about.
Absolutely.
And South Africa's in the crosshairs. Now, we've spent a good 30 minutes talking about games that we're playing, whereas the big dog in the room says, guys, your games don't matter to me.
Yes. Very true. South Africa, internationally from the ANC side, when they were still alone in control, they've made a calculated decision to turn their back towards the West in that instance, towards Europe, towards America, with a full face towards the BRICS agreement. And they put all their eggs in the basket, basically, of Russia, China, and that grouping. I believe that the whole grouping, although they've admitted new members, are in trouble. They are in jeopardy. Russia has been exposed to a very large extent because of the war in Ukraine, and being called to a certain extent that they've got a certain capacity, but they are not really a player in terms of the world economy at all. And then the Trump phenomena that came again, that was unexpected by some. I didn't think it was unexpected. I did expect that. And as you correctly point out, Mr. Trump is not a novice now in the game. He's been there. He knows this is his only last term, and he wants to move, and he's moving at a very strong pace with that view from his side. And I believe he's not going to necessarily draw a distinction between South Africa and other BRICS countries that he focuses on in terms of ensuring American interests, ensuring his view of international politics and the world. And we are in trouble in that instance. South Africa may try to reach out to the United States. Maybe, we don't know what influence Elon Musk may have with his South African connection. It could just be that he's a person there that could put in a word for us, and that Mr. Trump looks at us with a different view. I don't know. But we could also be in serious trouble.
It certainly makes our foreign policy stance a little bit more interesting.
Absolutely. And remember now, the ANC, and that is also a misnomer of the whole government of national unity, which indicates, as far as I'm concerned, a failure in negotiating and putting that thing together. The ANC just came out bluntly and said, foreign policy, foreign affairs, it's out of bounds. It's our selective own, only us will decide. You cannot have that, because now we are in the government of national unity. One component thereof, because to them it's non-negotiable, because they know if that was going to be part of a new approach, it will be a different approach. which they are not prepared to do.
Yeah. Because I know there's talk, and I'm quite happy to sort of help the rumors along, but about the new American ambassador being somebody who may be known to you, Joel Pollak.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Trump is not going to mess around. And then we must ask ourselves, our ambassador that we sent to Washington, the last one, or to New York, Washington, basically, Ibrahim Rasool, I think it was a knee-jerk move from South Africa's side. He was the ambassador in the past. He's got some experience. Obviously, he's a very experienced person. But in terms of his connections and positions and point of view, I don't think something that the Trump administration would necessarily be comfortable with.
Where do you see China in this whole picture?
China is a different kettle of fish altogether, because they think not in terms of presidential terms or election terms. They think in terms of generations and moving forward over time. I don't think it's going to change anything in terms of their long-term strategy and their long-term view to become absolute, even bigger superpower, and to become the strongest in that sense, expanding their economy, expanding their military, etc. But they will realize that for the next 4 years, they will have perhaps changed their approach. I don't see them going into a confrontation with the United States, because they would know there will be absolute repercussions from that side. But I don't think from their perspective it's a train smash. They will change their strategy for the next 4 years, tread carefully. And Mr. Trump, on the other hand, is a person that can make his deals. He will obviously reach out, etc., etc. He did invite the Chinese president to the inauguration, etc. So China will just change their strategy. Mm-hmm. What I hope for is that the liberalization of the economy in China and the growth in the economy at some stage may just assist to let the Communist Party and lose their grip. And just perhaps the creation of that huge middle class and the influence that the modern world are starting to have on all of them could perhaps cause the Communist Party, and that they could somehow turn into some kind of a more open, freer, democratic society.
Because obviously South Africa has nailed their colours to the mast.
Yes.
We firmly believe BRICS is the future, but I don't think are looking closely enough, isn't it? Because India is reluctantly part of BRICS.
Exactly.
They would love to leave that. They
Yes.
see no value in it.
Yes.
They want to do business.
Yes.
Brazil are one president away from leaving BRICS.
Correct.
Russia is Russia,
Yeah.
which kind of leaves you with some kind of alliance or feeling of an alliance with China.
Yes.
But China doesn't invest, does it?
No. No, it doesn't.
China trades, and
Yes.
they may be our biggest trading partner, and that's because they take our raw materials and
take
sell
our
us finished goods.
Correct. It's always to their own benefit. We see the developments in Africa coming in, building stuff, etc., etc. But it's not the normal kind of investment. It's not the normal kind of. They don't do gifts.
Yeah, they don't. If they build something, it's with a firm return, which they don't do. And they've tried that in Africa, and they've been burnt. They're not going to do it again.
Yes.
The West, on the other hand, they've got many failings, but then they've also got this guilty conscience.
Yes.
Which led to things like PEPFAR.
Yes.
Which was the program, for those that don't know, started by George W. Bush, of all people, where they have funded AIDS treatments.
Yes.
And more than 5.5 million South Africans survived because of American funding.
Yes.
And Donald Trump has summarily just suspended that.
Yes. I think there will be there may come a retraction on that, because I think Mr. Trump's first instance is to say, we are not going to waste our money and spend our money on foreign projects, etc. America comes first. Mm. But it could be that there will be a comeback to say, but this is a laudable cause, etc., etc. We'll have to see how that plays out. But in terms of the West, and there's also huge new developments. If you look at what's happening in Europe, for example, in terms of political parties, who would have thought that the Conservative Party would do so badly in the last election, almost decimated? Mm. We'll see what happens in Germany in February with their election, and other places as well. So there's a real reaction to the woke agenda that was in Europe to a very large extent, the influx of people coming into Europe, and the effect that it's got on those countries. Yeah. And there will be a pushback. There's no doubt. We see it.
Yeah, and the sort of antidote to the woke agenda is to say, don't expect me to give you money if you're going to talk shit about me.
Exactly.
Now,
I remember many years ago, we heard from one of the American senators. He said, the problem of South Africa is you want our money and our investments, but you want to be friends with all our enemies.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed.
Yeah. But the people have
Of course.
changed. And
Yes.
they're not going to sit back.
Oh, yes.
So these kind of topics, do you foresee them ever being discussed in Parliament or even in your GNU meetings?
No, not as long as the ANC's got the approach, we've got a carte blanche, and that is our terrain, and this is all we do. And that is typically from where the ANC came. They succeeded years back, before 1994, to have an absolutely control of the international community in terms of their view and their perceptions of South Africa. To them, this is their territory. As we progress, and the ANC may deteriorate and get weaker, and we may get better governments of national unity that are really balanced, that are really governments of national unity where people negotiate a complete new agenda and everybody commits to that and they can sell that to their electorate and their party structures. I believe we can move in the right direction, but not in the foreseeable future now.
Okay, so I know that you have your own agenda being your own party.
Yes.
But looking ahead with everything we've discussed, are you prepared to sort of venture your thoughts on where we go to with local government elections in 2026 in terms of outcome?
Yes, let me try. MK is going to make inroads, there's no doubt.
But will they get 14% of local government?
No, not nationally. Most likely they will do well in KZN and some of the provinces. Interesting enough, we've seen recently in by-elections, there were one of the places where they did not even put a candidate, but on polling day they were present with their own gazebo, their own things. They are there. And, well, the question is, where does their support come from? I think it comes mainly from the ANC and some from the EFF and some other disillusioned people. I know I'm wrong, but I will not be surprised if Mr. Zuma on polling day last year voted for the ANC. And why do I say that? I believe in his mind, he is the ANC. And his whole attempt with MK is a mechanism at the moment to allow the ANC to recover. So his view of the current ANC is it's being hijacked, it's currently under wrong leadership. But if that leadership can be taken out, Mr. Ramaphosa and the people around him, he can unite the real ANC. And hopefully the ANC's youth league, currently dressed in red, will also then come back to the party and he will unite the bigger ANC. Now, he's not a young man, he's an old man, and some people say that if he's gone, then the whole thing will collapse. I don't think so. I think there's a movement starting to build, and if you look at how people from the EFF and others are going in that direction, that is a strong factor that we need to take into consideration. On the other hand, we hope that people who feel strongly about the things that we feel strongly about as well will start to convalesce and start to build a stronger grouping in that sense.
Yeah, because let's say he puts that deal together, it doesn't mean that the voters go along with him.
True. No, that's
and
true.
just, well, you won.
No, that's true.
Well, Corne Mulder, lastly, the Freedom Front Plus, that's what we want to talk about, is your own grouping.
Yes.
Do you think that your performance in the last general election augurs well for the next local government election? Some of the things that have happened, do you think that your support base is growing?
We have to take serious stock of ourselves in terms of where we stand and where we are. We cannot deny that there were some serious losses during the election. The Democratic Alliance succeeded in taking away some significant numbers from us in certain provinces. I've done the calculations, and we must take stock of that. We cannot just deny that. I believe that the party should position itself in terms of where we need to be with a strong message. You cannot be and succeed as a party because you're against this or that. You succeed as a party because you stand for something and you project this is what we stand for. And you get people to come and support what you are putting on the table. You cannot build a party by being against the ANC or against this or that. So I think we need to do that. We need to prove ourselves and have our own voice and our own message. And we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we can recover and get some support back, get support of people who have lost interest in the political system altogether. We don't have much time because the election is mainly perhaps end of last year, or it could be in the beginning of 2027, we don't know. But I am positive. I think we can do that. And obviously the local government election will be a build-up towards the larger election in 2029. But we are still experiencing the rumblings of the last election of last year.
Well, that's why we said always a treat to listen to Corne Mulder. And another treat awaits you if you go onto the Pace Car Rental website, and you can get a 10% discount for your next car hire by using the code SONA, S-O-N-A. So book a car through Pace Car Rental, they keep us going. And if you haven't subscribed to the State of the Nation channel, do that so long. We're growing along quite nicely. And thank you so much for watching us. To Corne Mulder, thank you so much for coming in and making the time. And, we'll have you back on. We're going to hold you to a lot of these things that you've said. And to everybody that joined us today, thank you so much. We'll see you again on the State of the Nation.
Thank you very much.